big, dad and husband, and lots of ladies are always like, when is Leo gonna play that role in real life?
Right. I never really talk about that stuff.
It doesn't interest you at all.
No, I just never talk about those things.
He has an Oscar, a private island, $300 million, 2 decades of being called the greatest actor of his generation. And yet, according to the people who know him best, Leonardo DiCaprio might be one of the loneliest men in Hollywood. This is the story of how a kid from a rough corner of Los Angeles became the most famous face on the planet, and how that fame may have cost him almost everything that actually matters. Leonardo DiCaprio was not born into Hollywood glamour. He grew up on East Hollywood Boulevard in the 1970s and 80s, in a neighborhood that had little in common with the glossy image the name suggests. It was a rough stretch of the city, marked by poverty, drug activity, and instability. His parents separated when he was young. His mother, Ermeline, worked multiple jobs to keep the household running, and his father, George, an artist connected to the underground comic scene, remained involved in his life but not as a constant daily presence. Money was tight. The apartment they lived in reflected that reality every day. What set young Leonardo apart wasn't privilege, it was persistence. His mother took him by bus to audition after audition, sitting for hours in waiting rooms filled with other hopeful families chasing the same long odds. He began auditioning around the age of 10 or 11, and rejection became a routine part of his childhood. Casting directors reportedly found him too unpolished, too raw, not the clean-cut image studios were looking for in a child actor. It would take years of persistence before that started to change. By his mid-teens, DiCaprio landed a recurring role on the sitcom Growing Pains. It gave his family some financial breathing room and gave him national exposure, but it also risked putting him in a box. The cute TV kid, not someone serious filmmakers would consider for real dramatic work. DiCaprio seemed aware of that risk early on, and he began pursuing film roles aggressively, even while the show was still airing. The turning point came in 1993, when he starred opposite Robert De Niro in This Boy's Life, playing a teenager enduring an abusive home life. Sharing scenes with one of the most respected actors in film history was, by his own account, intimidating. But something clicked. Critics took notice and so did the industry. That same year, DiCaprio delivered a performance as Arnie, a young man with an intellectual disability, in What's Eating Gilbert Grape. The role required him to disappear into the character entirely, and audiences and critics alike were stunned by how convincingly he pulled it off. At 19 years old, he received an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor. He didn't win. That year's award went to Tommy Lee Jones, but the nomination changed how Hollywood saw him. He was no longer just a former sitcom kid. He was one of the most promising young actors in the country. Then came 1997 and Titanic. James Cameron's disaster epic became the highest-grossing film in history at the time, eventually earning more than $2 billion worldwide and sweeping 11 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. DiCaprio, playing Jack Dawson opposite Kate Winslet, became an overnight global phenomenon. His face was everywhere: magazine covers, merchandise, bedroom walls across the world. At 23 he was arguably the most recognizable actor alive. But that same fame came with an unexpected cost. Despite the film's overwhelming success, DiCaprio himself received no acting nomination for it. Some critics and industry observers at the time suggested that Titanic had reframed him as a teen heartthrob rather than a serious dramatic actor, making it harder for his subsequent work to be taken as seriously as it might have been otherwise. Whether that perception was fair or not, it followed him for years. He turned down a string of romantic lead offers that would have leaned into the Titanic image, instead choosing riskier, more challenging roles in an effort to be seen as a craftsman rather than a heartthrob. Between 1993 and 2015, DiCaprio was nominated for competitive Academy Awards 5 times without a win. In 2005 he earned a Best Actor nomination for playing Howard Hughes in Martin Scorsese's The Aviator, a performance widely praised for capturing the aviator's brilliance alongside his deteriorating mental health. He lost that year to Jamie Foxx for Ray. In 2014 his ferocious 3-hour performance as fraudster Jordan Belfort in The Wolf of Wall Street earned him another nomination, and another loss, this time to Matthew McConaughey for Dallas Buyers Club. By that point, the narrative around DiCaprio's Oscar drought had become something of a cultural joke. Memes about his repeated losses circulated widely online. Late-night shows referenced it. It was the kind of running gag that, on the surface, seemed harmless. But for DiCaprio himself, by multiple accounts, the years of near misses weighed on him more than his public composure ever let on. He rarely spoke about it directly, sticking to the well-worn line that he made films for the work, not the awards. But those close to him have suggested, in various interviews over the years, that the recognition mattered to him more than he let on publicly. In 2015, at 41 years old, DiCaprio signed on for The Revenant, a survival drama from director Alejandro G. Inarritu based loosely on the story of frontiersman Hugh Glass. It became known as one of the most grueling shoots in modern film history. Filming took place largely in remote parts of Canada and Argentina, relying on natural light and forcing the cast and crew to work in brutal, often sub-zero conditions. DiCaprio has spoken publicly about how physically demanding the shoot was, submerging himself in freezing rivers, sleeping in extreme cold, and eating raw bison liver for one scene. The production ballooned in cost and schedule, and several crew members reportedly left partway through due to the conditions. The effort paid off. On February 28, 2016, Leonardo DiCaprio finally won the Academy Award for Best Actor. The moment was one of the most talked about in recent Oscar history, a decades-long wait finally over, in front of a room that erupted the moment his name was announced. But what came after the win is, in some ways, the more interesting part of the story. In interviews and profiles in the years since, DiCaprio has suggested that the win, while meaningful, didn't feel quite like the resolution he'd imagined for over 20 years. Chasing something for that long can build it up into more than any single moment could ever deliver. That's not a criticism of DiCaprio, it's simply a pattern many people who spend decades pursuing a singular goal have described in their own lives, and DiCaprio's experience appears to be no exception. Away from the awards circuit, DiCaprio's personal life has become a subject of ongoing public conversation, particularly around the age gap in many of his relationships. Over roughly 3 decades he has been publicly linked to a long list of models and actresses, including Bridget Hall, Gisele Bündchen, Bar Refaeli, Erin Hetherton, Tony Garn, Kelly Rohrbach, Nina Agdal, and Camila Morrone, among others. Many of these relationships have followed a noticeable pattern. His partners have typically been in their early to mid-20s, and several of the relationships ended around the time the partner turned 25. This pattern has been widely discussed and joked about online for years, including viral graphics comparing his age to his partner's ages over time. It's worth being careful here. Dating younger partners is common across Hollywood and doesn't, on its own, tell us anything definitive about a person's character or emotional state. DiCaprio has never addressed the pattern directly in interviews, and without his own commentary, any explanation for it is speculation rather than fact. What can be said is that the pattern has been consistent and public enough to become a recurring subject of cultural commentary, for better or worse. His more recent relationship with Italian model Vittoria Soretti, who is now in her late 20s, has been noted by some observers as a departure from that pattern. DiCaprio's environmental activism represents another layer of his public identity, one that's genuinely significant, even as it comes with its own contradictions. In 1998, using the wealth from Titanic, he founded the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation, which has since funneled more than $100 million into conservation projects, renewable energy initiatives, and support for indigenous communities around the world. He has produced and narrated multiple climate documentaries, including The 11th Hour, Before the Flood, and Ice on Fire, and he addressed the United Nations Climate Summit in 2014. His advocacy work has earned genuine praise from environmental organizations and scientists, who credit him with using his platform to bring climate issues to audiences who might otherwise never engage with the topic. At the same time, DiCaprio has faced repeated criticism over his personal environmental footprint. Reports have highlighted his frequent use of private jets and his time spent on large yachts, which stands in visible contrast to the sacrifices his activism calls on ordinary people to make. He has addressed this by pointing to his practice of purchasing carbon offsets and investing in green technology, though many climate scientists and commentators view offsets as an imperfect and only partial solution. The tension here isn't necessarily hypocrisy in the simplest sense. It's closer to a contradiction that many wealthy public advocates for climate causes face, without anyone having found a clean way to resolve it. Both things can be true. His foundation has funded real, measurable conservation work, and his personal lifestyle carries a carbon footprint far larger than the average person's. Neither fact cancels out the other. 51, DiCaprio's life stands in visible contrast to many of his peers from the same era of Hollywood. Actors like Matt Damon, George Clooney, and Brad Pitt, all of whom rose to fame around the same time, have gone on to marry and raise children, even if their personal lives have had their own complications along the way. DiCaprio, by comparison, has never married and has no children. That's not inherently tragic. Plenty of people build full, meaningful lives without marriage or kids. But combined with the recurring pattern in his relationships, it has fueled ongoing public curiosity about what his personal life actually looks like behind the headlines. People who have worked with him over the years have generally described him as thoughtful, hardworking, and deeply serious about both his craft and his environmental causes. Some profiles over the years have also described him as guarded, someone who keeps a tight circle and doesn't let many people in, even after decades of fame. Without direct, on-the-record insight from DiCaprio himself about his inner life, it's impossible to say with any certainty how he feels about the trade-offs his career has required. What we can observe is the shape of a very public life that has, by most outward measures, prioritized work and causes over the kind of long-term personal stability many of his peers eventually built. So where does that leave the story of Leonardo DiCaprio at 51? He is, by almost any measure, one of the most successful actors in modern film history. He has the respect of legendary directors, a body of work that will be studied for generations, and a legacy in both film and environmental advocacy that few public figures can match. He also carries the specific costs that come with pursuing that level of success for over 3 decades, a public and often unflattering narrative around his personal relationships, a well-documented contradiction between his environmental message and his personal habits, and a private life that, from the outside, appears more solitary than his level of fame might suggest. None of this makes DiCaprio a villain, and none of it erases what he's built. It's simply a more complicated picture than the highlight reel of Oscar wins and blockbuster box office numbers usually allows for. The boy who rode 3 buses with his mother to audition after audition became one of the most famous men on the planet. Whether that trade was worth it is a question only DiCaprio himself could really answer, and so far he hasn't. That's the story of Leonardo DiCaprio at 51. Extraordinary success, real and significant contradictions, and a private life that remains, quite deliberately, mostly out of view. If you found this breakdown interesting, let us know your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more deep dives into the lives behind Hollywood's biggest names.